folks doing? Did you get your juice? You got what you need? I'm just about ready to begin. He left, he missed me left. It's healthy, baby. It's healthy. Welcome. My name is Medina Lichtenstein, and this is our second of 4 series workshops on Latino leadership development. Last week, we were able to go through what the procedures of city government are, basically what is city government in the city of Holyoke. It is my intent for the next hour is to go over with you what happens when Latinos run for public office. And I will share with you what my experiences have been in the 8 years that I have been on the Holyoke School Committee representing this ward. And last week we went over what wards are, how people can get elected, who gets appointed, and so forth. At last week's training, I was able to bring to you some pretty big packets. I was not able to have them ready for this workshop. It is my intent to have them available to you at next week's workshop. And if you have any questions or additional information that you need, just let me know. I have a very bad cold, so that if I begin to sneeze, cough, and choke, have no fear, I will be okay. But it was either bringing myself not feeling well and spreading the germs and not coming at all. And I appreciate all of you coming. When I ran 8 years ago, or really 7.5 years ago, for the Holyoke School Committee, I really ran in I would say, unorthodox way, uncommon way. I ran for the school committee because I was angry at procedures and process that the Holyoke Public Schools had at the time, and some of them are still in place. I had 3 sons in the public schools at that time, and it was out of anger that I ran, and I'll explain some of that to you as we go along. But today, what I would like to do is to go through with you all of the things that I've learned, what are the proper way, as we call it, the correct way, politically correct way, to run for public office, for elected office. Individuals that run for public office here in the city of Holyoke or even for neighboring communities run either on issues that affect their neighborhood and community. They want to be part of public, or should I say, the social change. They want to have an impact. Some people run for what they think is the glory of holding an elected position, but no one knows all the sacrifices that one has to make while you're in public office. But those are some of the things that motivate people to run for elected office. Anger, issues, having impact on your community, your neighborhood, and of course, being part of change. When one decides to run for office, whether it's that you already have people that are your confidants that are telling you run, or you do it on your own, you need to have an advisory committee. Is there any way of turning off the heat? She closes the door and the heat stays on. I'm going to pass out.
I'm trying to turn it down.
Thank you. Since we're not a large group, I'm going to sit so I can see my notes a little closer if you don't mind. Thank you. Moving right along. The advisory committee, for the most part, your confidants, traditionally turn into a campaign committee. And your campaign committee are usually the ones that begin to prepare the candidate. and you prepare the candidate in a number of ways. They begin to prepare the candidate with the platform. What are the issues that you're going to run on? It is, again, to bring equality, to bring change, to have impact in the neighborhood. One safe way of what I call those safe issues is I will vote in favor of increasing the police budget or the budget of the Department of Public Works. Everyone wants to have their trash picked up, their streets cleaned. Everyone wants to feel safe in their neighborhood. Those are safe issues. To say that something in the negative, you have to be sure that you have a good voting bloc, a good amount of people that will feel the same way as you do to be able to say something in the negative. For us Latinos here in Holyoke, one of the negative statements that we were able to point out in the last election was that many people for the school committee and for other offices such as city council, and at times even those running for mayor, said that they would vote every time against bilingual education, that they would eliminate bilingual education in the public schools. Although we saw that as the negative, they knew that there were a number of voters in this city that would back up that kind of a vote. So they put it out there. We wouldn't vote probably in favor of that, but they knew that in saying that their constituency, the people that they were running to represent, they would support that, because a lot of people here in the city of Holyoke felt that bilingual education is too costly, bilingual education isn't doing what it's supposed to, why keep on learning a different language when you're in America, all of those type of negative thoughts about the bilingual education program. But they did have their voters in their area supporting that. So they took the chance, but they knew that they had to vote. So you could either build a platform that is very safe and make safe comments and saying that you want equality, you want equal access, you want to have safe streets, you want to have the city cleaned up. Those are, everyone wants those types of things. So those are some of the things that one can put together in putting together your platform that you know no one will be harmed by it. Everyone would be happy with that. In putting together your campaign committee, your advisory committee, or once again, the closest, and sometimes it might be just yourself, your spouse, it might be yourself and a group of friends that from school that feel the same way when you run for student council. That will start giving you advice, will start saying to you, these are some of the issues that I hear, this is what people want to see happen, and this is how we want to see change. When you're putting together your campaign committee, which eventually you have to if you're going to run for public office, those are the individuals that you want to keep very close to you. They're your eyes and your ears. Those are the ones that are going to inform you about what all the information is. If you're running for school committee, for me it was Dora Fuentes, who passed away from cancer, but when she was with us, she was my eyes and ears, my right arm in terms of everything involving teachers, administrators, students, quality education, the safeness of the buildings. She was who I depended on bringing me issues that I needed to be very sure of regarding what's going on in the schools. There were other individuals that then used to give me information, and again, it's giving you accurate information, not only giving you information, but for it to be very accurate, because if all you have to do is be inaccurate once, and you could lose your campaign. We've seen that happen in national campaigns. But I had other individuals giving me other kind of information. So like this, I was, when I was running, I was getting information from individuals who had first-hand knowledge, first-hand experience in places that I didn't have all the information. When you run for public office, you don't have to know it all. What you need to do is have people informing you. Once you get elected, it will be your business then to keep on getting first-hand information. But in putting it together, your campaign committee, again, you want responsible people, people that are respected in the neighborhood, or whether it be in the neighborhood or the entire city that you're running in. And you want to make sure that those individuals hold very key positions in your campaign. When I ran, I first went and took out nomination papers, and I will explain to you what that process is all about. And then I put my campaign committee together, because I ran because I was angry. I forgot, I didn't even know all of the logistics, all of the pieces that I needed to know before I took out my nomination papers. So I kind of like had to backpedal after I took out my nomination papers. But when you're putting together your campaign committee, you want your very key people to hold certain positions in your campaign. For instance, you would want to have your campaign manager to be either your closest friend, could be your spouse, could be a relative. And you would want, again, key people that hold information about issues that you need to be responsive to be either your publicity director or your fundraising director, so forth. I will get into that in a little bit. But your campaign committee is key to you. They could either make you or break you. If one of those key positions messes up in some way, forgets to do something, you could lose your election very easily. Without it being what you could say your fault. It doesn't have to be that you were out of character, but because the candidate can't be everywhere at the same time, and because the candidate can't do everything that it takes to run a successful campaign, you need to have very key people responsible for certain areas. One, like I mentioned a minute ago, nomination papers was one of the very first things that I did in running for school committee. The nomination papers, and I'm not sure if it's the same at the high school, at either high school, if you've got to go get a certain amount of signatures to get yourself recognized as a candidate. You get those nomination papers from the city clerk's office in the city of Holyoke. Once again, like I said at our last workshop, anyone can be a candidate as long as you're 18 years of age, you're a registered voter, and of course you live in the city of Holyoke. That's it. So you go over to the city clerk's office and you say, I want to run for school committee in Ward 2. They immediately get these long sheets of paper and they type in your name. You get 3 sheets. They type in your name as the candidate, they type in your address, and they type in what ward you're running in, or if you're running at large. And don't forget, at large means for the entire city. Your nomination papers basically need to be signed by a certain amount of people depending for what position you're running for. When I ran for school committee, I needed 50 signatures of registered voters in Ward 2. My husband, who was the one that used to run around while I was at work and got my signatures for me, he came back with 150 signatures. For the reason that I was running against 2 other people at the time. And depending on who gets to the city clerk's office first, let's suppose someone signed my papers and signed your papers and signed your papers, whoever handed in the papers first, that's the first one that's able to claim that name. So that if I was to come in only with 50 signatures, and any one of those 50 signatures had signed another candidate's papers that was running for the same position, I would now have 49. And it happens often, because sometimes people have difficulty saying no to signatures. How many times don't you go walking and someone says, can you please sign this? It's a bill that's trying to get passed. Or can you sign this in support of? And you just kind of say, okay, you sign it off, not sometimes always reading or understanding what the issues are. And it happened that time that I had less than 110 signatures out of 150. So very clearly, people had signed other candidates' papers. You have a certain amount of time to submit those nomination papers back to the Office of Registered Voters. You don't return it back to the city clerk's office. It goes back to the Office of Registered Voters. They have a listing of all of the registered voters in the city of Holyoke and their addresses and the wards that they live in. And they go through. They're the ones that then give you a little receipt when you hand in those nomination papers, and they say, Betty Medina Lichtenstein submitted 150 names on this date and their signature. Then you get a call back if you don't have enough signatures on your nomination papers. So that it is always advisable for you to bring in those nomination papers back way before the deadline. And the deadline, as I remember, was the first week in September. Primaries are in October and elections are in November. So that it's always advisable to bring it sometime in August, so that if you don't have enough signatures, you're able to go back, get more signatures, submit it, take a chance again. Maybe you still won't have enough, and you still need to give yourself some time. I want to reflect for a minute on someone who was my mentor for many years and unfortunately lost his campaign because of an error of nomination papers. His name is Nelson Merced. He was the first and only up-to-date Puerto Rican state representative coming out of Dorchester, Massachusetts. He had grand successful campaigns. He had once again become our only state representative in the State House. He not only advocated for his own community, but did for the entire Latino community in the state of Massachusetts. It was not unusual to see Nelson come into Holyoke on a Saturday morning to talk to us about this type of a workshop. This was his dream. He always wanted to see leadership development coming down into the neighborhoods and having community folks run for political office. That wasn't unusual for Nelson. Unfortunately, during the last election, one of his campaign workers that was responsible for nomination papers, okay? Remember what I said? Key people in key positions. This person had not been in that position in his former campaigns. The person that was in that position had gotten married. She was his aide at the State House, had gotten married, and had moved to Puerto Rico. So they had someone here that was somewhat new to Nelson's campaign committee. That individual did not submit the papers on time. When his opponent, and you always have your opponent watching over your shoulder, because they're always ready to get you on anything you say or do. They took watch, she took watch. She is not minority, and she was able to say that there were a lot of signatures on his campaign papers of people that had moved out of the district, that weren't registered voters in that district anymore, or had already signed her signatures, her nomination papers. Because it was not done on time, Nelson then was disqualified as a candidate. Right? He was already in office, he had made history, and he was disqualified as a candidate. So it gets somewhat complicated, but I will let you know what ended up happening for that particular election. He ran on a sticker campaign. And a sticker campaign means that you are going to let the people, the voters of that day, come out and vote who they want to vote for. Sticker campaigns have never been successful in the minority community. What happens is that there is on the machine, it depends in different ways, but somehow you get that person's name that's available on a sticker, and it's available that day, that election day. And then rather than voting for someone who actually has gone through the correct procedures and has been validated as a candidate, You then take that sticker and you put it in an empty box that's available next to the other candidates. We, unfortunately, are not that informed, we're not that sophisticated in voting. What ended up happening is that Nelson did not win the sticker campaign, he lost it. So Nelson is no longer our state representative. We are hoping that he will come back. He is a man with a vision and a lot of potential, but I wanted to reflect on the nomination papers. I wanted to reflect on the campaign committee, because one person forgetting or not being responsible to keep to a deadline can lose your campaign, and thousands of dollars go into campaigns. I'll talk about that as we go into fundraising. So far, any questions? No? Everybody's with me? I think that's all I want to talk about nomination papers, given that I'm not sure if that's the same thing that holds true for the schools, is it?
Realistically, you have to get 50 signatures.
You do? Okay, so it's very similar. Julio was on student council, like I said, at the last workshop of the high school, and he's informing me that for running for student council, we also need 50 signatures. And it's the same thing as school committee. So here's a school election and a municipal election requesting the same amount of signatures. Interesting, they're tough. When you take out nomination papers, it is advisable for you to have some kind of a press release, some kind of a statement ready. Because when someone takes out papers that has not been in office before, the press will immediately start hounding you. When I took out nomination papers, and again, like I said, I ran because I was angry. I was like, I'm going to run for school committee. And because two gentlemen asked me to run, I had no idea what to say, how to say it, so I get Channel 40, Channel 22, all of the newspapers, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm running. Why? Oh, because I'm mad, because I'm angry, and I used to say those things. And I have now come to terms that you can really prepare yourself much better than the way that I had prepared, or should I say, not prepared myself. You know why you're running. You have people that have probably asked you to run, people that confide in you. It is okay to sit with them and ask, what should I say? Why is it that it's important for me to win the seat? Because when you're running for a seat, whether it be on student council, school committee, city council, or the mayor, it's because you're running to represent people. You're not running just to represent yourself. And what your issues are. People have been talking to you. People have been telling you, we don't like the way the school looks, we don't like the discipline policy, we don't like the lunches, we don't like the buses, we want new buses, or we want buses to come in our area, or parents should be more involved in schools, there should be building-based management. All of those things are said to people that are respected and people confided in the neighborhoods. I have yet to see someone, even in our last national elections, to say, I'm going to run and not take money from anyone because I've got a vision. People usually run for political office or for an elected office because other people have confidence in you for you to be their voice. So that it's okay to ask people that you confide in, what should I say? What should we say when the press comes to us? Should you do a press conference? It's okay to, in a facility like this, to come together, a table like this with 2 people next to you, 3 people, 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, and say, we are going to run, Juanita Santiago. We're going to run her for school committee and make a statement about it. It's okay to do that. You don't have to do things by yourself. And the more people that you include, that you trust, the better you will be. There's plenty of work in a campaign, whether it be for student council or whether it be for your mayor or for your state representative or for your president, as we know what all of that takes to get into. Like I said earlier, your campaign committee is your right arm. You need to handpick the people that you're going to be relying on to either perform certain tasks for you or to provide you with certain information. When I ran, I had Miguel Arce as my campaign manager. From the time that he agreed to be my campaign manager, and I must share with you that I asked 3 other people prior to asking Miguel, and they all turned me down, either because of conflict of interest or because they felt that it was too risky. First Latina running for public office. Some people felt that they would have difficulty with their jobs with their positions, if it was to be found out that they were assisting Latina, a person of color, to run for a public office. So that 3 people turned me down. They're still all my friends, close friends. But Miguel did agree to be my campaign manager. And the very first thing that we started to do was to decide who we should invite to the table. It was my kitchen table, by the way. Where lots of coffee and a lot of potato chips were taken in during that time. The campaign manager should assist the candidate in handpicking the other people that will play key roles. Your public relations coordinator, your publicity coordinator, your fundraising coordinator, secretary, and it could go on and on. Campaign manager should be assisting you to respond to all questions, media questions, and also questions from organizations that probably will invite you to come to them. They usually invite you to go to them rather than they go to you, to ask you questions, to drill you, to find out what you're about, what makes you tick, and if you were to be elected, how are you going to represent them? Are you going to be a friend to them, or are you going to be an enemy to them? They want to be able to know that up front. For school committee, the Teachers Association calls in candidates, the parents call in candidates, the Holyoke educators in the past have called in candidates. Holyoke educators consist of principals, program directors, so forth. Sometimes even other unions for the school that work under the school system, like the custodial and the cafeteria workers, they want to know who you are and how sensitive you are to their issues, so that when their contracts come up, they want to know how you're going to vote, or at least they want to feel close to knowing how you vote and how you feel about their positions and how important their positions are in the system. So the campaign manager is the one that basically takes care of everything under you. It is that individual's job to have you always prepared for the best and the worst that's going to happen. That person is supposed to, if I could use the word, isolate the rest of the world from the candidate. Candidate's primary, most important piece of work between the time they take out nomination papers to the time of the election is knock on doors, shake hands, make sure that you connect with the people that are going to vote for you. You have other people doing all of the other stuff, but it is very, very important for the campaign manager to be like a wall between the rest of the world and the candidate. I'll give you a for instance. I kept on being told that I needed to attend the bingos that go on at the elderly towers. Very important, go to the bingos. Finally, I had difficulty getting into the elderly towers. They said I had to bring in door prizes for that night. I mean, there's all of these little things that I call hoops that you gotta jump through. So I come in with my door prizes and I'm all ready. And I figured, let me find out who lives in my ward here, right? So I said, how many people live in Ward 2? And they were all still counting their chips and getting ready for the bingo. They could care less who I was. And I said, who lives in this area? No one raised their hand. I was up at Folsteady Towers, which is on Maple Street, Churchill. So nobody lived in Churchill. So it means that nobody came down from the tower. Said, who lives in South Holyoke? Who lives in Springdale? Nobody. Those are the 3 sections that I represent. So I said, well, where do people come from? They go, we mostly come from Chicopee. And it was like, well, how is that helping me? So here I had my door prize. I almost felt like saying, I'm out of here. But there I was. It's things that you learn. It's those little type of things that someone should have been checking before me. Was it worthwhile taking out of my pocket the money for the door prizes to go to a bingo that no one that was there had the opportunity to vote for me even if they wanted to. So I did my little thing there rather than feeling like I'm not going to say anything to these people. Talked about education in a global way. And, all kids need to be educated. We as adults have an obligation to provide education for them and blah, 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 blah. But if I spoke for 2 minutes, it was a lot and I was out of there. And what I did was I went right across the street, knocked on doors. Hello, my name is Medina Lichtenstein. That's what I stand for. Please vote for me. Some people were cooking, some people were cleaning, some people were taking care of kids, some kids answered the doors. When the kids answered the doors, I took the opportunity to say, what do you think is wrong with the schools? How would you like to see them changed? What do you need? Are all of your needs being met? And I heard enormous amount of responses from the kids. The kids are the best ones that give you information as to what's going on in the schools and the teachers. So I've always relied on my students to pump me up with information. I had a public relations coordinator, and that's the individual that keeps track of your schedule and all of the events that are going on in the community that you're seeking office for. That's the individual that if there's going to be, for instance, when I ran, Ruben Blades was brought in and performed up at the War Memorial, and while I was getting dressed, my public relations person said, do you know that you're supposed to be down here shaking hands? And I was like, oops. So quickly got dressed, quickly ran down there and started shaking hands. And at that point, you don't know who lives in Ward 2. You don't have a captured audience. And you shake everyone's hand and you give everyone a flyer. And you hope that out of that group that attended that concert, that you get 10 people to vote for you, okay? And if not, at least there's name recognition. Maybe someone will say, here's $10 for your campaign. I don't live in your ward, but here's a donation to your campaign. So you want to be able to make those connections. Please look at them.
How important for you is 10 votes in your district, in your ward?
In a district, it can make it or break it. At the last workshop, I explained that I won with less than 500 votes. To win on a city council, you need more than 1,500 votes. So that let's say Ward 4 at the last election was won, I think, within 10 votes. That's critical. That's critical. In Ward, you might have the most, at times, 200 people voting for you. So that 10 votes, and should I say, voting for that position altogether. We would vote for a mayor, and traditionally everyone that comes out to vote will vote for one candidate or the other. But for school committee, some people might say, I don't have kids in the schools, I don't care, or my kids don't go to public schools, or whatever it may be, I don't like the candidates. So that you're not guaranteed that everyone that comes out to vote that day is going to vote for a position that an election is going on for. And I've gone, I know, to the national elections a lot of times, and I wonder, do I really want to vote for this other position other than president? It's basically decisions that a voter makes during that election time. And do the candidates reflect what your issues are and how you think that they have responded to those type of issues. So there's a lot of things that people take into consideration hopefully prior to election day. Publicity. Publicity is key in a campaign. For my campaign, it must have taken at least 3 meetings for us to decide what kind of poster we were going to have. Should we have red, white, and blue poster? Should we have a poster with my face on it? Should we have a poster with my entire name on it? Colors. The colors of my bumper stickers, they were yellow and purple. I think it took us over 6 meetings. We could not come to an agreement on colors. One said this color, one said, oh, I saw this real pretty color, bring it in the next meeting. And there was, no, that color represents this, or that color represents that. So all of that information should be given to the publicity coordinator, because the publicity coordinator is the one that's going to be basically in charge of your propaganda. What is it that you're going to say? How are you going to say it? What are your flyers going to look like? What is your literature going to look like? How is your posters going to look like? Is it a face, no face, name, no name? Should it have everything about you on that poster? A lot of information, no information, just a picture. So your publicity coordinator wants to be on top of that. That person's key. You want to make sure that that person's resourceful. Has knowledge of all of the state-of-art technology. Can they work on a computer themselves? And also, again, do they have the resources? Do they know of all of the resources that are in the community, and that they are in touch with what the community responds to? My campaign, we decided my face. It's not that I'm gorgeous, but it's because people could recognize me. I had been working in the city of Holyoke for a long time, and people had difficulty, at least our folks here in this community always have had a difficulty with my last name, which is Lichtenstein. My dad's name is Medina, but again, my business cards traditionally always end with Lichtenstein. So rather than forcing people through an educational process of my name, we figured, let them recognize the face. Let them know that I'm the one that's running for school committee. We'll figure out the name issue later on, and we did. Fundraising. The individual that is going to be in charge of fundraising is key. For those of you that have ran campaigns in schools or have been involved in any kind of fundraising effort, whether it be for your baseball team or your football team or for whatever, a cause, you know that fundraising is hard. You've got to get people to believe in the issue. You've got to make sure that you connect with people and let them know that they are the only ones that can make a difference. Not only to come out and be supportive, but they got to dig real deep into that pocket and bring it out. And make sure that it comes out. And make sure that when it comes out, it's everything that they possibly can give without making them financially bankrupt. So that if you're going to someone and knocking on their door and saying, my baseball team is going to dissolve unless we come up with $500, and someone gives you a quarter, that's not going to cut it. When you're running a city election in this ward, you've got to make sure that when people give, they give everything they possibly can give. How do you do that? You target certain individuals that you know can cut it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from your neighborhood. Let's be honest, none of us are rich that live in Ward 2. We're not. We're just not rich. We might own a home, we might have a nice apartment, we might have an okay car, but we're not rich, bottom line. When I was running, I needed a lot of money. I needed to cut through history. Since no one had held that office before me that was a minority. So we needed all of the publicity. I needed to get on radio. We were hoping to get on television. We didn't do it. I needed lots of posters, lots of literature. I needed to pay for stuff. I needed to be able to, when they wanted me to go to bingo again and they wanted more door prizes, I needed to make sure it wasn't out of my pocket that all of that money was coming out, although I almost made my husband financially bankrupt, but that's another story. I'll give you the example. Miguel Arce, who at that moment was also holding the fundraising coordinator position, he wrote letters to certain individuals in the city of Holyoke that have money, that were living what we call pretty fat, okay? They were doing okay. Interestingly enough, they're not here. But he wrote a letter and he said, I was running, and that they had always supported the idea of having a Latino in public office. They themselves always said, this is what the goal is. So he said, it's time to pay. You want this person to run, you want this person to win, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. An individual sent us $100. And we had to have an emergency campaign committee meeting around that. Do we accept the $100 or do we send it back? Do we send it back? Because we needed more money. And that individual could dish out 5 times that amount. So, what do? Is it disrespectful to do that? Should we be happy with what we're getting? And what kind of position would that put us in with that individual who was a key figure in this area? Key.
Did you guys in your mind already?
We decided to send a check back. Send it back. This person had been saying it's key. So Miguel put a call and said, we need to meet. What about? Did you get the check? Oh yeah, got the check. We need to meet. And it was hard. It was not an easy decision. It was hard. I think Miguel must have aged 20 years before that meeting. Guess what?
I just thinking about it.
We got more money. We got the money that we needed. Okay? You've got to make some hard decisions. And sometimes they're not comfortable. They really aren't. And sometimes you're saying, but he gave, at least he gave, he didn't have to give. But when people say to us, when you get the Latino community in place, when more Latinos run for public office, when students get into a college or when they pass their SATs, right? Those special little tests that they give you, then you come and talk to us that we'll be happy to subsidize. We'll be happy to pay for that student's whatever. Right? It's always like, when you do this, when you do that. We were doing it. We were doing it. And we needed more money. And that person was one of the people that we targeted as dish out the money. And he gave. And you want to know something? I think that there was no disrespect. It was dealt with in a very respectful manner. The things that he had said before publicly and in private to us came back up on the table. And he said, you're right. You're right. It probably hurt to dig in real deep, but it hurts everybody, okay? But if we wouldn't have done that, in our opinion, it was the committee's opinion, that we would have been disrespectful to ourselves, that we really didn't believe in what was going on. Because it wasn't only me running, it was the issue of being able to hold a political seat that had never been held before. And we took the chance, and we did okay. It was okay. Now, if it was to happen today, and we were to approach the individual that is in that individual's position, it might not be okay, because that individual is not as financially sound as that other individual. So you kind of like, and it's like you say, one can say, how do you know how financially sound one is? How do you make pass judgment as to how rich or how poor someone is? You really don't know what's going on. But there are some chances at times that you've got to take, and if you know who you're targeting, if you've been having that kind of a rapport for years, you know who's doing okay and who's not. And you take those chances. It could have gone a completely different way. I'm glad it didn't. I got the money, and we continued on.
Excuse me, it's not a lot, and you briefly give me an idea how to give someone his money and ask me for money.
I'm sorry, getting money from someone?
Yeah, like you did. He gave you $100, you went back, and you told me you don't want 100, you want more. Can you teach me real briefly how to do it? No,
sure.
I respect go like that.
I was not present at the meeting, but when Miguel returned from the meeting with this other gentleman, what he said is that this is what he laid out was what our needs were. He said, this is how much we anticipate the campaign will cost, okay, from the beginning to the end. It totaled out a little over $8,000. It's a big chunk of money for someone that doesn't have it. And it was actually the first campaign that started taking that much money to run the school committee seat in this ward. there was, I would say close to half of that we put in ourselves from our household, which meant that the kids did without certain things, that it took me longer to buy my house, that I drove around in a jalopy that I think used to clunk out every time I came from South Canal Street, where I lived, to South Summer. You just make those kind of decisions. That's what we did. And also, there's a lot of demands on the candidate that sometimes people don't take into account. For a male candidate that's running, I don't know, how, for someone that doesn't have the so-called suit type job, all of a sudden you have to be at all of these different places. So now you have to what? Get maybe 2 or 3 suits? How much are suits today? For a woman that's running, I mean, you might have a couple of nice outfits, but how does it look when you are out every single night and every 3rd night you've got the same thing on? You know, someone catches up with it, like, funky. So that you've got to be able to also be ready to take on some expenses yourself. Every time you have a committee meeting, they used to be at my house, it was cooking. People used to come right after work. You got to be sensitive to, if people are giving up their time, you've got to give something back. Because bottom line, the candidate wants to win. If the candidate didn't want to win, they wouldn't be running. So that there's certain stuff that you have to give that comes out of your own pocket. And when you total, and if I haven't said it before, I'll say it now, you should be running 6 months before election time, at least 6 months. And that's short. Usually there's some preliminary things that go on ahead of time. So for 6 months, you're dressing new, you're eating a lot, and with a lot of people, you're doing a lot of stuff. If you have children, you're paying a lot of babysitting money. If you're young, you are asked, would you, as a candidate, would you co-sponsor the graduation at a daycare? Would you bring the graduation cake to another thing? Would you help in distributing ribbons to the best swimmer at a local pool? So you're always like, giving money. And sometimes that doesn't come out on where all your money has been spent. You take in money, and very clearly you are responsible for reporting every single dime that comes in. Everything under, I think it might be $25 now. When I ran, it was for every $10 that you collected, for anyone that, if you were to give me $10, there is a form that goes to the political finance committee at the state, and you've got to write down the person's name, their address, and how much they contributed. And that has to be reported.
Over $10?
I think it's over $10. I think Ruthie told me, I think now it's $25. When I read it was $10. So for every $10, your fundraising person has to be documenting where that money came from. Of that money, for everything you spend that money on, you need a receipt. A receipt that comes from someplace. I can't write you out a receipt and say I made up posters. I have to be someone that has letterhead, that has receipts imprinted with my name to prove that I performed some kind of work or service for the candidate. And all of that has to be submitted to the Secretary of State's office. If not, there is terrible fines. There is even imprisonment that could be imposed on someone if you do not follow the rules and obligations of that committee. And that committee is tough. Let me leave it there in terms of fundraising. Any questions? Clear? Tough job.
What is the limit for
How much?
donations? Yeah.
No.
Because I understand that some public office have a limit of $1,000 per person to keep the campaign.
Oh, per person? Okay, yes. There are some elected offices that there is a limit. There's also rules on, oh heavens, certain businesses, incorporations, nonprofits, PACs, and all of that is always under review and with changes. That is one of the most important pieces of someone's campaign. Because if you get, really immersed in any kind of problem with that in your campaign, your opponent is going to jump on it. Oh, you're responsible, they can't deal with financial matters, and every position that's elected has some kind of financial responsibility to it. So that is one piece that you never want to get caught up in. You want to make sure that all of your paperwork, all of your money, all of your receipts are being handled by someone very responsible. And although you have people that are coordinating certain activities, the candidate is the person that's ultimately responsible. Just like an agency, you have your director, you have all these people working for you. Whatever they do reflects on who you are and what the agency is about. So you want to make sure that you are always supervising, if not you, your campaign manager. We started very small in a very naive way, and we grew very quickly, and there was a lot of accountability. I have only but the ultimate respect for everyone that worked on my campaign. A lot of hard work, a lot of long hours, but we tried to make sure that we were informed about everything that we were responsible for. So yes, you're right, and I would only say that because that holds true for certain offices and not others, that if someone was ever to decide to run for a particular office, one of the first places you got to hit is the Secretary of State's office to get your papers. If not, the city clerk will tell you who to call and what the reporting process is.
So how much is the limit for school committee person running for school committee?
No one gave me that much, so I never worried. I'm not sure if it's $1,000. I know that the max that I received for one check was $500. But it was never up to 1,000.
For senators, 1,000.
Excuse me?
For senators, it's 1,000.
It is 1,000 for senators? Okay. At the national?
Yeah, for mayor too, because it's a controversy now between
It's always being challenged and discussed, and that's like a whole other world. Very difficult, but again, one should be very accurate about what their accountability obligations are.
But it sounds like if you're going to run, go to some office and they give you a list of, but you don't have to pick somebody for your campaign who already knows this something.
No.
You don't have to know yet already.
No, the city clerk gives you a lot of information when you take out nomination papers. The city clerk also will hound you, and continues to hound me, about reporting. When you are a candidate, I believe there are two reports that have to be submitted when you're elected the same. Even when it's a non-election year, you still have to be reporting if your campaign committee is still intact, how much money have you received, who gave you how much money, what did you spend it on. So that process continues. I just went down the other day and signed some papers saying, I don't have a committee. I haven't had a committee since the first time I ran. Because you have to keep on informing them, and since she's new in that position, I needed to inform her and sign lots of documents and just let her know that, and also that I'm not running again. So that needs to be taking place right from the time that you leave office, and even then some. Secretary. One needs a secretary, like everyone needs a secretary, to make sure all of the paperwork, all of the deadlines are being met. If you're having committee meetings, probably recording what decisions have been made. It would be a nightmare for someone to walk away from a meeting thinking one thing when in fact the decision was completely opposite. Let's say in Nelson's case that the individual that forgot the deadline said no